This program is brought to you by the members of WCNY. Thank you.
Welcome, America, to Balancing Act, the show that aims to tame the political circus of two-party politics. I'm John Katko. This week, America's role on the world stage. Are we the leader, or are we part of an ensemble cast? What should our role be moving forward? In the center ring, former UN ambassador and two-term governor Nikki Haley gives us her take. Then, two members of Congress take a swing at the issue of international aid. Plus, I'll give you my take, and Bloomberg's Elisa Parenti fills us in on what's happening next week in Washington. But first, let's take a walk on the tightrope. So, what should America's role in the world be? Imagine for a moment that war breaks out in Europe, and our friend England is fighting off a devastating air raid attack from a hostile world power. Would the US step in? Should it? Well, this was the very situation in World War II when the Nazi blitzkrieg was destroying cities across the United Kingdom. Did you know that America stood back, hesitant to participate? That is until, of course, the attack on Pearl Harbor. Then, the US was all in, and they were all in big, supplying vast quantities of arms and supplies, including tanks and troops, to the war effort. But that wasn't the first time America attempted an isolationist stance. After gaining independence, George Washington famously advised the nation to avoid, quote, entangling alliances, end quote. And the term America First, that's not new. Woodrow Wilson used it during his presidential campaign in 1916, promising to keep America neutral in World War I. Well, we all know how that one turned out. Following World War I, though, it was back to isolationism again. The US didn't join the League of Nations, and that was even after Wilson had proposed it. After playing a significant role in the Allied victory in World War II, the US emerged as a global leader, shaping post-war international institutions like the United Nations and NATO. Through the Cold War that followed soon after, America embraced the role of global citizen, taking an active part in diplomacy and supporting democracies around the world. But in recent years, however, policies from both Republican and Democratic administrations regarding things such as the Iran nuclear deal, Afghanistan withdrawal, and war in Ukraine has sparked wild divisions within America. And then, of course, there's the question of aid. Some argue for drastic cuts to US international aid. Most Americans agree that with trillions of dollars in US debt, we simply cannot afford to burn money on wasteful programs. But Americans also believe we should help foreign countries in need and contribute aid in times of crises. Today, President Trump champions America First, but is he really an isolationist? His views on Gaza, the Panama Canal, and his recent phone call with Vladimir Putin suggest a much more complex worldview. Can we reconcile a desire for isolationist policies with our identity as a leader of the free world, especially in an era of unprecedented technological advancement and global interdependency? Perhaps America can't get out of the spotlight on the global stage at any time. Is our involvement simply inevitable? Now, let's put the spotlight on our first guest in the center ring. If anyone has perspective on America's role in the world, it's our next guest. It's former ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She served in that role in the first Trump administration, and she serves as our guest in the center ring tonight. Welcome, Nikki, and I can tell you it's been a real honor to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Well, I can tell you, I remember first encountering you back when I was on the Homeland Security Committee in Congress, and you testified about not having Gitmo transferred to South Carolina. What a shock, you were against it. And I remember how articulate you were and how much of a leader you were as a governor. And then, of course, your time as the UN ambassador was just a terrific time, and you did a great job. So your perspective on our subject tonight, and that is the world stage and what America's role is on a world stage, I think is really important. So I'd love to hear your take about what your view is, given all the stuff going on around the world today, what America's role should be and how should we be implementing it?
Well, thank you, John. I can tell you, I really got clarity on that when I was at the United Nations, because what I saw is, when America speaks, the world listens. When America acts, the world follows. And what America does, the world tries to be. So it's really important that we always have moral clarity. And I think that there's no shortage of issues in the world. And we see that, whether it's the Russia-Ukraine situation, whether it's China with Taiwan, whether it's what's happening in Gaza, all of those things, American leadership matters. And I think in the last administration, it was taking one of appeasement and going quiet. And this one is a bull in the china shop. And, between both of those, what I will tell you is you have to have one, moral clarity, and two, you have to have trust with your allies. That's going to be the most important thing going forward, because they will follow you if they trust you, and they will listen to you if they trust you. And one of the things I did at the United Nations was we blew up a lot of things at the United Nations, and we called out a lot of things. But every one of those ambassadors, friend or foe, knew I would always tell them the truth. And I think that's the key, is America needs to have trust when it comes to what we say, what we do, and we always need to be prepared to follow through on it.
I always told the agents and all the task forces I ran that we need to project strength so the bad guys will respect us. And there's a difference between strength and something else. But projecting strength on the world stage, I think, sometimes prevents a lot of things from happening. And I look at, Putin going into Ukraine, and I look at what happened in Gaza. And I just don't think if America was projecting more strength back at that time, that those bad actors would do that. And I'd like to get your take on that as well.
They weren't scared of us.
Right.
I mean, that's what it came down to. After Afghanistan, it was such a debacle that it basically gave all of our enemies around the world, their thought was, if ever there was a time to move, it's now. And they did, because they didn't think we'd have the backs of our friends. And I think that played out. Whether it was Ukraine, America was slow to act, slow to respond, and not decisive. Whether it was with Israel, America said that they were going to have Israel's back and then started to pull back on it. And so it was a field day for Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Now is the time to self-correct. And I think that, what we do is we have to be decisive in what we say, and more decisive in how much we're going to have the backs of our friends. If we're going to have the back of Ukraine's sovereignty, then we need to mean it. If we're going to have the back of Israel, then we need to let them lead and we support. If we're going to have the backs of Taiwan, we need to understand that China's going to give us a hard time, but they are testing us right now. Everybody talks about the first 100 days of an administration, and that's a honeymoon. Well, it's a honeymoon domestically, but it's a test internationally, because all of our friends are waiting to see how much of a friend we're going to be. And all of our enemies are waiting to see, do we really mean what we say? And are we going to have strength about it? And so we are in the test phase right now of how countries look at us and what they think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And listen, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the other part of it, because it's clear to me that you believe America needs to have a strong role on the world stage. And my opinion is, I don't think there's a choice in that, right? But there's also a way about how we spend our money and how we are stewards of our money, especially in a time when we have such gigantic budget deficits at home. And a big issue was blown up as far as USAID. That is the program that gives aid to other countries. And you were in a catbird seat for that at the United Nations. So I'd like to get your take on the program in general, then the problems they found on it, and what the heck we should do about it.
Well, first of all, I think this is a good practice across the board. Every one of those agencies has gotten too bloated, too big. A lot of the employees there have thought that they couldn't be fired, and everybody needs to have accountability. And so I think that it's a great wake-up call for every agency. I can tell you, when we got to the United Nations, in the first year, we cut $1 billion off the top of just the UN budget. You know, we looked into the United States mission at the United Nations. We started cutting. We did hiring freezes just because it's good practice. USAID, I can tell you, is a massive slush fund. And it's not just a slush fund for countries around the world to get their pork projects. It was a slush fund, as you know, for many members of Congress. They would have their pet projects and they would go and give money out. And there was no transparency. And I think if there's anything we need to see in government today, taxpayers deserve to know how their money is spent. You know, as governor, I put all of the spending of every agency online for all South Carolinians to see. I would love to see the federal government put all spending online so that we don't have to hear about it on the news, or we don't have to hear about it from Doge, but we can actually go online and see exactly who's spending. And I took it a step further. Any pet project, I made a legislator have to put their name next to it. So they had to be accountable for that project. And I think that's the same thing in the federal government. If congressional members have to put their name next to things, they're going to think twice about whether they want their constituents to see it. And that's going to bring some accountability to the process as well.
No, I couldn't agree with you more about the lack of oversight of these programs. And it seems like the USAID is a microcosm for a lot of things in the government spending. Then that's now getting a bright light shined on it. And I think that's long overdue. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the good things that the USAID does. I mean, they help it sometimes. And so what's the other balance of that? What's the side of the good things that you can accomplish with things like the USAID program if it's properly administered?
Well, I think that, you know, that's the problem, is because when you go and you poison the well with a lot of projects that don't matter, you hurt the good ones on what they were intended to be. I actually do agree that putting this under the State Department where it can have more accountability is a good thing, but PEPFAR is a good example of that. PEPFAR has really saved millions of lives from HIV and AIDS, and that was considered one of the most successful programs under the Bush administration, and that's helped us all globally. So you can look at things like that and see where it does do some good. You know, whether there's infrastructure that helps with our friends that need it so that they don't have you know, any sort of problems domestically for themselves, but it needs to be a win-win. One of the things that I really pushed in the Trump administration when I was there was I wanted all foreign aid to be listed. And it was after Israel had, you know, the world pretty much condemned us for moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And I put a book together and I told my staff to list all 193 countries. The next column, I told them to put the percentage that those countries voted with the U.S. and against the U.S. And I had the last column be how much foreign aid we gave them. And I took that book and I gave it to President Trump, and he lost his mind. He was flipping pages, yelling out countries. And I said to him then, I said, I'm not saying that we give foreign aid based on a percentage vote of the UN, but that should be one of the things we look at. Quit trying to buy friends. Quit trying to pay off enemies. If we're going to be a partner, it has to be a win-win, and America has to benefit from it. And that really goes back to the transparency I was talking about. Is if you can't show the American people what we're doing and why we're doing it, we shouldn't be doing it.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And you know, there's for everything there is a balance. And that is USAID in particular. There's some good things that happen, but we've got to have transparency. And I thank you so much for your time. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you for your public service all these years. And we certainly hope to see you back in the arena again soon, my friend.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much. It was great to be with you.
Thank you. Now, let's put the conversation and our next guest on the trapeze. Joining us now to take a swing at the issue of U.S. funding for international programs and the role of the United States for international development, or USAID, are Virginia Congressman Don Beyer and California Congresswoman Young Kim, both good friends of mine. Welcome, folks, to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's great to see you again.
It's great to see both of you. As I often say to many of my old colleagues in Congress, I miss cool cats like you, but I don't miss the job. So with that being said, I still want to. With that being said, I still want to just touch off the conversation, asking you about your initial thoughts about the USAID program and where you see it going from here. And, Young, why don't we start with you, if you can?
Sure. The role of the USAID has been from its inception with the intent to provide the U.S. foreign assistance through USAID and make sure that our standing in the world can project strength. Right? It has proven to be useful in advancing America's interests. And it also served as an important extension of American influence and strengthened our national security. And it did, as I mentioned, project soft power to deter our adversaries. And it supported our allies and partners and ensured the U.S. is seen as a leader on the world stage. But we also know that when the United States is not there to support our allies and partners around the world, look, remember, right now we're in a strategic competition with CCP, and China and Xi Jinping are ready to step in to fill the vacuum and provide assistance. So I think the role of USAID is critical, but I think over time, there has not been enough oversight. So that's what we need to do.
Yeah, Don, what's your take?
Well, first of all, I just agree with everything which Young just said, which is a nice way to start. But I've just been horrified by what's happened to USAID since the Trump inauguration. I'm prejudiced for many reasons. My wonderful grandmother, who died at 98, spent the last 15 years of her career in USAID, traveling all around the world, working on training programs. And I've seen over the years, I represent Northern Virginia, so I have many USAID contractors and staff here. So it's very close and personal. Is just as Young said, that this is maybe the most important projection of soft power that we have. We are influencing countries to look up to us, the United States, as this shining city on a hill. We're feeding people. We're dealing with diseases like AIDS and malaria and Ebola and bird flu. And we're shutting the door to Chinese influence in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, in East Asia. When we leave, well, let me just back up for 1 second. The Republican criticism, coming from President Trump, Elon Musk, has been that there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. Certainly, there will always be programs which a new president should say, no, I don't agree with that. But those are going to be 1 or 2 or maybe 5% of the programs. What's happened right now is they have taken a nuclear weapon to all U.S. aid across the world, shut it all down. And that's having a disastrous impact on the people we serve, on our U.S. government employees who've been servicing them, and a gift to China. So I think we need to lift USAID back up in any way we can.
Okay, well, I totally understand what both of you are saying, but obviously the big issue with respect to USAID is the extent to which there might be waste or fraud or abuse. So, instead of taking the proverbial sledgehammer that they're taking now, what would you do, Don, to try and shore up and make sure that the money is being well spent and going to where it should be going?
Well, first of all, don't believe the lies that we're hearing. Some of the crazy things, even Elon Musk said, not everything I say is true, quote unquote. The notion of 50 million condoms to Gaza, which is ridiculous. There were no condoms to Gaza. And so far, they've identified programs they don't like, typically having to do with LGBT, and in countries like Uganda that are very homophobic. I understand why a Trump administration would not like those programs, but they've come up with no fraud and no abuse yet at all. This is where inspector generals come in and where new USAID administrators come in and say, I like these 92 programs. I don't like these 8 programs. We're going to get rid of them. And that's the way to do it. Firing the inspector generals, by the way, is never a great way to start because they're the ones who are supposed to be looking out for waste, fraud, and abuse.
So, Young, what's your take?
Chime in on that? Yes, of course. First of all, let me remind you, every administration comes in and they do their reform and oversight of all the programs that's been done. And this is not just Trump doing it. Previous administrations have done that with respect to USAID programs. Of course, we have to, during the review, we have found some unproductive spending abroad, which have undermined many of the targeted, effective, and foreign assistance programs that strengthen our national security. To the point that you just mentioned, there is, let's say, in the last month of the Biden administration alone, Congress was notified of nearly $1.5 billion in foreign aid that the State Department sent overseas. I can cite some of the examples. $2.5 million sent through USAID to build EV charging stations in Vietnam. $15.5 million for organizations like the International LGBT and Intersex Association to promote radical social agenda in places like Zimbabwe, El Salvador, and Lebanon, or $11.5 million for gender programming throughout the State Department. So I would agree, this spending is not critical to U.S. national security of advancing our interests. And I would argue that we need to find ways to tighten our pocketbooks and rein in federal spending. I think both sides agree on that. So this year, the Foreign Affairs Committee, of which I serve on, will do a full reauthorization of the State Department so we can restore congressional oversight of the executive branch, and we'll do a line by line of what is being spent. Because I believe, and you believe too, every taxpayer dollar should be stretched as wide as possible and support America's national interests.
So, Don, we've got about 45 seconds left, and you can have the last word, my friend.
Yeah, well, very quickly, one person's radical social agenda is somebody else's just normal life. And the key is, yes, every administration looks carefully at it. And you cited things that a Trump administration would not like, but they cut everything.
Well, folks, listen, I wish we could go on forever on this, and you both have very good, passionate positions, and I appreciate that. The bottom line is, it sounds like the programs are worthwhile, but we've got to fix some of the issues with them. I thank you both. I commend you both for your leadership in Congress and your willingness to cross the aisle, and hope to have you again on the show very soon. Thanks so much. We've heard from some great guests today, but here's my take. The United States has the largest military in the world. We have the largest economy in the world with tentacles all over the world. And with that comes responsibility as well as honor and privilege. And that is, we're the leader of democracy in the world, and because of that, we need to project strength so bad actors stay in check, and we need to project our strength throughout the world. Whether we like it or not, that's the role we have thrust upon us because of our stature on the world stage. But don't take it from me. Take it from a great American who said it so eloquently so many years ago, Ronald Reagan.
Like it or not, we are the leader of the free world. And that is not a role we asked for. It's a role that was thrust upon us by history and by the hopes of those who aspire to freedom throughout the world.
Ronald Reagan, a great leader for all times, and we could sure use some of his leadership today. Now, the question about USAID and helping those less fortunate around the world. To me, that's a much more murky question because of how mismanaged that program has been. Yes, it helps many nations. Yes, it helps solve many problems. But if it's not administered correctly and there's the amount of waste that there seems to be in that program, to me, it's in trouble. So I think the jury's still out with respect to USAID. My take, get your act together, get it streamlined, and get the money to the people that need it and nowhere else. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Lisa Parenti to fill us in on what's happening next week in Washington. Hey, Lisa, what's going on next week?
Well, we're very focused on the budget. Speaker Mike Johnson has been able to secure what he has been calling one big, beautiful bill. It contains an extension of the 2017 tax cuts, more border security, more for defense spending, and something we're really keeping our eye on here at Bloomberg. It lifts the debt ceiling to $4 trillion. The House Freedom Caucus has bought into this one bill in that they were mollified by a cut of $2 trillion in spending. We don't have a lot of visibility into what those cuts will be. We can anticipate that that is pretty significant. That's a big number. And so it's possible that when the larger House gets its hands on this and the details start to leak out, that constituents might start to be reaching out to their members and saying, hey, I have some concerns. So will mainstream, more moderate Republicans continue to go along with Speaker Johnson's plans? That's what we'll have to see. The Senate working on a parallel plan. And Thune has some different ideas, starting with the fact he wants it done in 2 bills, not 1.
Well, Lisa, there's certainly a lot going on, that's for sure. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about it in the weeks to come. But I got a question, and that is, what component of this whole budget process is the tariffs? And how much of tariffs going to pay for the budget?
Well, it has been incredible amount of news on tariffs coming from this particular White House. And we started with the biggest, our trading partners, Canada and Mexico and China. That package that moved across was a really good playbook as to what we can anticipate with the reciprocal tariffs, which were announced more recently. And that is that this is the way that President Trump negotiates. This is how he intends to get what he wants in terms of acquisitions from and agreements from our trade partners around the world, from Europe, from elsewhere. And he's looking to absolutely boost what he would call level the playing field, so that those international trade partners are not charging us so much for the goods that we are importing into the U.S. None of that, though, will take effect before April 1, and the markets really like that.
Lisa Parenti, welcome to the team, my friend, and I'm glad Bloomberg is on board as well. Thanks so much for your contributions, and I look forward to seeing you next week. To send in your comments for the show, visit WCNY.org/balancing act. For Balancing Act extras and exclusives, follow us on social media. Thank you for joining us, and remember, in the circus that is politics, there is always a balancing act. I'm John Katko. We'll see you next time, America.